What's going on, guys? Jason here. Going to do a fun tutorial today on how to build out this fancy button. You can see I have a outline or button border that fades out at the center on the left and right here. I'm going to show you guys how I do this. So let's dive right in. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be using both Etch and AutomaticCSS to work through all of this. So you'll see me typing in a bunch of variables. And the really awesome thing about AutomaticCSS is it's a full CSS framework that gives me the ability to do things at a much faster pace and very consistent. And in this case, I can tie directly into their button settings and pull all those variables into my custom button here. So first off, let's talk about how I actually get the border set up. This is going to give you a little bit of background on how I do this. So specifically, I'm using the background image property, and here you can see I have a linear gradient set up with both a light blue and a light green. So you can see that on the screen here, the light blue showing on some of these and the light green showing on others. And from here, I use the background origin and background clip properties on each of these to designate what you can actually see here. So when we look at a border box, you can see I have this dashed red border on all of the boxes. The border box is going to have that background image color, the linear gradient, fill the entire box, including behind the border. Where on the padding box, it's only going to fill up to where the padding would go. So you can see behind the border, it's actually not filling that area. And then the content box is only going to fill whatever the content is filling here and nothing else. When we go into the background clip, we're now combining these together to clip out a very specific part and show a specific part. So now you can see, unlike up here where we're just showing the border box, showing all of the blue, you can now see I'm getting the green, which is hidden behind the blue for most of this. So the green is only showing behind where the border is. And it does matter the order in which you're showing these. So the padding box is the first one showing the blue, and the border box is what's showing the green, and that's what's being clipped out. When we jump over to this one, the content box is what is showing the blue, which is on top, and the padding box is showing the green behind it. And lastly, the content box again showing blue, with border box going all the way to the green. So this gives you a little bit background of how I'm actually going to achieve this with my custom button. So let's jump on over there. I'm going to click on the content hub here, and I can actually jump directly through to that page in Etch here. So you can see I have some of this started already just to save a little bit of time. I'm going to go ahead and click on my custom button here, and I already have some of the CSS pre-filled just so you guys don't have to see me type a bunch. And I do have notes on my other screen so that I can make sure I reference everything. So you'll see I have this getting started button up on the top here. This is a button style directly from AutomaticCSS. It's just my button secondary class added on to that, so you can see how it's styled there. And then this button, I have no styling at all currently. So a lot of these are going to get variables directly from the button framework. So let's go ahead and start typing those in. So in this case, we're going to look at the button padding block here. If I extend that out, you can see I'm getting that padding there. The great thing about AutomaticCSS is they name their variables exactly what we're doing here. So again, button padding, and this time we're going inline, and it automatically expands out that variable for me when I hit tab. So you can see now I have my padding set on my button. Inline size, I'm going to go ahead and set this one to button width. Make sure you spell everything right as you type this. There we go. So typically the button width I only need to really set if my container is not set to flex along with some sort of align items, which in this case I have it centered. Otherwise my button is going to take the full width of the outer box that it's in, or the outer div. So in this case, setting that button width is going to automatically make sure it's always only the button width there. Next, we're going to go to our color. So in this case, we want to look at what our main color is going to be for this button. So in my case, I'm going with a dark button here, and I'm going to go with my secondary color similar to here. So I'm going to go ahead and say secondary, and I don't want secondary dark, I just want secondary. And for my font weight, I want to go to my button font weight. You can see it bolds that out. Text transform. And you can see all these are going to be our logical properties here. Just got to make sure everything is spelled right as you go through here. And I might have missed something on that one. Let's go text transform on that one. And I seem to be missing something on that. We'll come back to that in a minute and figure out what the issue is there. Border radius, I'm going to put button radius here. And again, I need my 2 dashes in the beginning. Got that expanded out. Now you can see I'm getting that rounded border just like the one above. And my button border width, my button border style. And now you can see I'm getting my border coming in here. My border color is, initially I'm going to set this as my whatever color I'm going to want this to match. But actually in this case, because of what we're doing, as I mentioned here, I'm actually going to set my border color to transparent. And you'll see that border disappears even though it's technically still there. So now we're going to go, I'm going to set in my background origin, which is going to be border box, and then my background clip is going to be the padding box, comma, border box. And the reason I'm doing that first is just so what we start to do with the background image here is going to show through. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to break this out into separate lines just to make it easier to see. So the very first thing we're going to do is put a linear gradient on here. On this first one, I'm just going to go the same as my background color that I have on the page. In this case, that is my neutral color. And then from here, I'm going to add in a comma and hit enter again. And we're going to enter in another linear gradient. So this linear gradient, I want to go to the bottom. So if we look at our button here, we can see starting at the top, we have our color, it fades out a little bit, and then we get back to our color. And you can even get a little fancy, like on this one, I have a white at the very bottom just to give it a little extra glow. Where up here, I do not have that. So you can get a little more picky on how you want to do this, but our linear gradient is going to start at the top and go to the bottom. So from here, I'm going to build this out in a total of 4 different areas. So we're going to start at the top, we're going to break about here, start again, and then finish at the bottom. So as we go through this, we're going to use percentages in our linear gradient to do this. So the very first color I'm going to start with is going to be my secondary color. And again, it keeps filling my secondary dark, so I got to look at why it's doing that. And here I'm going to start at 0%, hit comma, my next line. Now I'm going to go into a secondary trans 10, And what this is going to do is actually expand out into my OKLCH setup for color with a 10% transparency of my secondary color. And for this one, I want it to go to 30%. So you can kind of see as I was building that out, if I take my comma away, we're starting to get that top part of the border with it starting to fade. So let's go ahead and put our comma there, go to the next part. It's going to be the very same thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this so I don't have to type it again, except I'm going to change my percentage here to 70. And then lastly, I'm going to finish it off with repeating my secondary color again. And this one, I'm going to add into 100% and take my comma off. And you can see now that we're starting to get that border with the fading part. So these two percentages here, the 30 and 70, is where you're going to have to play with where you want your border to fade or start and fade into. So in my case, I played around with trying to get it similar to where my text was. So if I go back to my text transform here, I'm just going to go uppercase and just set that as a hard value for now. But you can set that up as your actual button property. I didn't want to spend too much time going through that, but I'm going to set that there so you can see I have it as transparent there. I'm going to click off this so we can see what our button's looking like here. So you can see we have that border fading. It's coming into the same color as our background here because that's what our actual background color is here. And you can see as I hover in it, we're getting this primary color, which is my link color. And we'll get to that in a moment here. But the other thing you'll notice when I hover or look at these buttons is the background isn't quite fully that dark background. It's got a little bit of shade in there. So how it did that is with a box shadow. And specifically in this case is going to be an inset box shadow. So again, I'm going to enter here, go inset and set up my box shadow. And here's where you're going to have to play with your colors and your distances and everything. So you can see now if I don't set a color, it's filling in specifically not quite to the center where my text is. And that's what I want. But I want a much more transparent color. So again, I'm going to go with my secondary trans 10. Expand that out and you can see it's much more faded now. But the next thing I'm going to do is put a comma and we're going to come down and do one more box shadow. And this is going to be our box shadow on the outside. So it's going to go 0, 0. And in this case, I want no box shadow when we're not hovering. So I'm just going to go zeros the whole way and set an RGBA of 0 for all. And that way we have no background color, but once we get down into our hover and focus here, we can get those both coming in. So again, for my color, I want to go ahead and set my color to be, if we look here, I'm getting my hover color. So let's jump back. So I'm going to go into my variables and I'm going to go secondary hover, expand that out. So now you can see we're getting that hover color showing there. And then on my box shadow, I'm going to do the very same thing that I did down here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. We're going to change our inset to be a 0 transparency on hover. And then here we're going to actually switch out the last bit here. So for this, I'm going to go 30 pixels and 10 pixels. And for my color, I'm going to go with my secondary trans. And this one, I'm going to go 30. So now when I hover, you can see I'm getting that hover or that box shadow in the background now. Again, you can play with this to figure out what's going to make sense for the distances on your box shadow and the colors and transparencies. But if I go ahead and hit save and I refresh, you can see we have this custom button here. And again, it has that little bit of gold background when I'm not hovering. When I do hover, that disappears. It goes and matches my background color, but I'm getting that fading in. And if I tab through, you can see on my typical button, I get my outline. And on this one, I'm getting my outline as well. And I could even play with what outline or what color outline I'm getting on that. I'm just going to leave it as my standard website outline color for this one, but you can change that if you need to as well. But you can see that I'm getting that hover effect, whether I'm mousing over it or if I tab with my keyboard there, and I'm getting my full hover effects here. So that's how I go through and did that. You can see pulling in my variables from AutomaticCSS, which can be set right within our button global settings here. So if I change these things, you can see my buttons actually change. I'm going to go ahead and leave them as what I had them, but you can see that it actually updates on the spot as I go through this. If I want to change that, you can see it changes for both my buttons. And that's the power of using the variables. I can just come here and change all my buttons at once and not have to worry about going back to each iteration of my button. So I hope you guys found that helpful. If you want to see more tutorials like this, please let me know. If you have questions, please leave a comment. I'd love if you'd subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. I'm going to start making a lot more tutorials using Etch and AutomaticCSS. Both are extremely powerful, and I've really loved using Etch. I'd highly recommend checking it out. Thanks, and we'll see you guys in the next tutorial.